Welcome back to Scattered Salt, where we share the testimonies and ministries of Christians all across the world. Today I have a very exciting video planned for you. I was recently able to interview missionaries to Hartlepool and Durham, England. So in this video you will see the Smiths talk about the hardships of being in England, the joys of being in England, but also most importantly, the need for Christ in England. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it.
What surprises people most about England spiritually?
In terms of Americans, that we feel that, we still quote Spurgeon from pulpits in the States. We know about Amazing Grace and the history that there is behind the great hymn writes here. But when you come here, the country is we're in a post-Christian society. Standing right in front of Durham Cathedral today, you walk around here, there's no gospel presence. You ask the clergy how to get to heaven, they can't even tell you how to get to heaven. You play devil's advocate with them, and they'll turn around and say things like, "Oh, just try to be a good person." And so, these are people that are supposed to be proclaiming the word of God, and they don't even know the first thing about how to get to heaven. The most important thing. So that's that. I think that when Americans come here, that's one thing that shocks them, is that England is not the spiritual firepower that it used to be.
Many people think about England as a spiritual country. What's the reality of that today?
The reality of that today is we're spiritually dead. We're in the spiritual gutter, you could say. Again, we're in front of the cathedral here today. They get 100,000 people through here every year, and not one person comes out changed. Not one person comes out saying that they've met Jesus Christ. We are a country that believes in such diversity. We have every religion under the sun here, and we're all supposed to be inclusive. But we've come to the point where England is now a very secular country. A lot of people, that you ask them if they believe in Jesus, and most people in this country now will say no. We've got about 4% of the whole population that will go to any type of worship service, let alone Christian. And of course, the fastest growing two religions, and I'm going to class it as a religion. We've got atheism is a religion, because you have to believe it.
Yeah.
I don't care what they say, you have to believe it. And of course, Islam is really fast growing, although Christianity right now is holding the top. But then, of course, they clump Christianity together with every denomination.
Yeah.
So we can't say that we're a Christian country. We're a secular country, and there is a hatred in this country towards the things of God. Just mentioning God's name sometimes is, unless it's a cuss word, is not accepted.
Yeah.
We have noticed that when we talk to people on the street and outreach and things like that, that people actually have never even thought or have even a little bit of a concern for where they're going to go.
Yeah, I noticed that the other day.
They don't think about it. And that was one thing that amazed me. I was like, in America, everyone is grandma saved and great grandma saved. There's generations of Christianity, whereas here, Rob is a first generation Christian. There's no concern for their soul at all. They don't even think about it. They just live their life and then they die. They have no hope.
And that kind of answers the next question, but I don't know if there's anything you guys would want to add. What are some of the biggest spiritual needs here?
There needs to be a drastic turn to the Lord.
Yeah.
Something has to happen.
We really,
drastically.
Yeah, we really need a move of God here. Everyone thinks that a new prime minister is going to solve the issue, but I want to put Jesus on the ballot box. Amen.
Yeah.
Because he's the only one who's going to make a difference. Our late Queen Elizabeth II, she said from one of her Christmas speeches, and that was the only time that she would ever write a speech herself, was the Christmas address to the nation. And she even mentioned that she sees only one hope for our country, and that is Jesus Christ. And our King, he was coronated on the King James Bible because he said it was his mother's favorite book. which is really sad that it's not his favorite book.
Yeah.
You know, when of course he had leaders from all different denominations and faiths at his when he was in his coronation, and so you know, and he will speak a speech about Ramadan, but he won't say anything about Easter. And you know, he will include, even when it's a Christian holiday, he will include other faiths within that speech as well. He won't just make it a Christian thing, you know. So it's really sad. And you know, you hear of our government, they're taking out a prayer room that had been in the House of Commons for over 150 years, and they say that we don't need prayer in our country anymore. And so we see that our government, you know, they're not even sticking up for the values that they say that our country is supposed to have. You know,
was built on.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, I say
what
it's
America
not.
talks about all the time. These people wouldn't know what we were talking about.
No.
Yeah.
I stood by John Bunyan's grave in London for 10 minutes and asked people if they knew where his grave was at. And I was standing right beside it, and people had no idea what I was talking about. They didn't know who I was talking about.
Yeah.
And it's really sad that they've completely forgotten their heritage here. You know, if I go and ask people, you know, where Amazing Grace was written, they can't tell me. But they can tell you, you know, they can tell you what the diversity book says, you know, and they tell you, you know, not to get political about this, but you know, we're being told it's almost dare I say, a sin to be proud of being British and the Christian values that this country has.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are some of the misconceptions Americans have about y'all's ministry here, or ministry here in general?
That we're going to come over here and we're going to see thousands of people saved. It's just not that way. We really have to build a friendship with these people before they'll even listen to us about Jesus at all.
I think it's not results aimed, for sure.
Yeah.
If someone wants results, they might not want to come here, because we've been here for 4 years. We've had, I think, one lady got saved, but as far as like, have we had massive people come to church? No.
Yeah.
And you know, and then when you get people in the church, you almost have to, you know, undo the wiring per se and rewire them, because they are so religious. There's so much religiosity here that nobody really knows what they believe. So you're having to disciple them, which is, you know, which is part of the ministry. But a lot of the ministry here is really to disciple and undoing errors that, you know, that they think of mainstream religion, what they think of Christianity, or what they believe Christianity to be. Because, you know, like I said, you know, we've got this place behind us, and you know, it's all ritual. It's not.
It's a spiritual museum.
It's a spiritual museum, and it's all ritual. They go through the motion. There's no, you know, they wouldn't know the Holy Ghost if he walked through there and slapped them all in the face, you know.
Well, like we saw today, they were taking communion in there, and he said stand up, and they all stood up, and then repeat after me, and they all repeated after him. Then they all took the cup, and then they all sat back down, and it's very, you know, they ticked the box for communion today, but their relationship, if you asked that person if they knew if they were going to heaven, they wouldn't be able to tell you.
Yeah.
People don't believe that it's that Jesus paid it all. You know, they might sing about Jesus paid it all, but they don't believe it, because they think that they have to work to get to their salvation. And that's what we deal with on a daily basis here. It's everything's a works-based salvation, because that's what mainstream religion here has taught.
They don't have a time they can tell you either.
No.
Notice that. If you ask someone what their testimony is, like the guy yesterday, I asked him what his testimony was, and he goes, "What do you mean?
What's a testimony?"
When I got baptized is what he said, and I was like, "No, like when did God save you?" And he didn't have an answer. So I thought that was like really, really sad.
And like we're all supposed to be quote unquote Christians, you know, the Roman Catholics here, the Church of England here, we're all Christians, you know, we're all part of the family of God, we all worship the same God. Yet when you try to hand them a piece of Christian literature, they go absolutely mental at you. And like today here in Durham, you know, I tried to hand a lady a tract, and she was like, "I'm Roman Catholic, I don't want your evangelism," and all this and the other. I was like, but I thought we were all on the same team, you know.
According to them, we're all on the same team, but when it comes down to it,
we're not. And they hate the things of God, even, you know. But we should expect that a little bit, I think, because, you know, the religious crowd hated Christ, so
Yeah.
they're going to still hate his message today.
I think too we're dealing with a lot of people who in America everyone's heard of Jesus, and we are all generations of Christianity, but actually here there's some people who they don't even know what we're talking about. So to like quote verses to them or preach to them, they don't even know what we're talking. They've never heard.
Yeah, like across the street from us, she didn't know what a Bible was. She didn't know what church was. She didn't even know what prayer was. And she says she likes to come over to our house because we do that thing
before we eat,
which of course we bless our food before we eat. And she didn't know what a Bible was. She didn't really know who God was or Jesus. And just like the other day, she was over at the house. She said, "Well, I'm not doing a sin."
Yeah.
So they don't really, even the concept of being a sinner, they don't really understand that either. So that's one of the difficulties as well, just to make people believe that they are a sinner. We live in a country where what has everything. So we're very materialistic. We're in need of nothing. So they think that because they've got houses, they've got land, they've got money, that they don't need Jesus Christ because they have everything. Whereas, you go to a country that's less fortunate than ourselves, they'll accept Jesus Christ and be happy for being poor. But here, it's not the same way.
They have everything.
They have everything. They have everything, but they don't have Jesus. And it's like, why do I want Jesus when I've got all this?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, you need Jesus because you've still got a sin debt,
Right.
So, and that has to be paid for. And if you don't deal with it this side of eternity, God will deal with it on the other side of eternity, because God has to deal with sin. But they don't like that reality either.
What has God taught you guys specifically here in serving in England?
Patience. But even the way we approach people has to be different.
So different.
Yeah.
It's so different. Like I said before, you almost have to build a rapport with these people before they'll even talk to you. And we live in such a diverse country where we have all walks of life here. So you never really know which way it's going to go, either, or what people believe. And so we obviously we hand out tracts on the street. We're able to do that where our infrastructure is built more towards it's built more towards where we can go into the city centers or the town centers and physically hand people God's word, and go where we can go and walk and put literature in people's homes as well, because we have the post boxes here, the letter boxes. And so we're able to do that, and where our neighborhoods are so much more close knit, you can build a friendship up with your neighbor, and then eventually that will lead to maybe opening up with the gospel as well. We're literally on each other's doorstep for the most part. So that aspect is definitely different. But we as Christians, we are few and far between, and there's so few of us here as well, and we're guns blazing like 1,000% of the time. We're so involved. Like, for example, our ministry, we have two works going, and we're flat out 1,000% of the time, and we really, the only fellowship we get is when we're at church or when we do special gatherings, like when we do a potluck or something. So that's the only time we get Christian fellowship. So I think
patience is one thing that we've learned, but I also think that we've learned to see God in the little things.
Yeah.
Like comes in our house, she lives in my house practically, and her the other night she was doing something, licking a cake batter bowl or something, and she said, "I'm not doing a sin," but 4 years ago she wouldn't have even thought that was a problem, because she was doing whatever she wanted to. But also like little things like them, like they'll get us a gift, or like, "Oh, this made me think of you," and we got this or something like that, or like raising their hand in church, because they've seen me raise their hand in church, and worshiping the Lord. I feel like we have to be excited for those tiny things, because huge things don't really happen all the time. But the small things, you can see the Lord. If you knew all of their stories, you could see how the Lord's working in their life. But
definitely.
as someone who's coming to visit, you wouldn't necessarily be able to see, whoa, look at the results, that
Yeah.
they've got. But I think that we have to be excited, happy in all the little things, little as much when God is in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And just like, somebody even taking a track, especially in Durham, somebody even taking a track is a victory,
Yeah.
because we can stand for hours and never hand out anything. That's how cold people are. So, someone just taking a track, or someone stopping and having a conversation with you, and
or even showing a little bit of interest.
interest.
Yeah.
Somebody or somebody, receiving a track on the street, and they're there in church on Sunday. That's a So people, well, that's just a given. That's what you're there to do. But that's a small victory to us, because people aren't queuing up outside the door anymore. And most of our churches here, if you're a Bible believing church, you're running the best part. In the teen numbers, you're not looking 20s, 30s, 40s.
Yeah.
For the most part, you're very small congregations, and so even the folks that you have come in to even see a little bit of growth in them is a major victory. Just like with our ladies, we've seen some growth in them within the last year, and that is a huge blessing to us, because it's like, you're not here in vain, and you're seeing this discipling that you're doing coming to fruition. So that really helps too.
Actually, like, wanting to grow.
Yeah, like their desire even in their heart to say, one of the ladies told me, she said, I just feel like I don't know enough, and all this stuff in it. But I explained to her, I said, it's a journey. It's everyone has different, they're in different parts of their Christian walk, and we are learning. I'm learning every day. I learn 100 things every day living here that I never knew, or pieces of history that I never understood, and it comes together when you're standing at it.
Yeah.
And it's the same way with your walk with the Lord, So that has to be patience and finding joy in the little things, seeing God work in little tiny ways instead of big, massive, massive ways.
Can you share a story where you clearly saw God work here?
I think that when we first moved to our house that we bought, we just moved to the area. We just bought the house and different things like that. And we were up one night, and about 2 a.m. we heard a bunch of slamming and banging around on the street across from us, or the sidewalk houses across from us. We live in terrace housing, so we could see each other. And we were wondering what was going on, and we thought, oh, there's something that's bad. And we heard a guy squeal his wheels and run in this house. We looked and poked out my art window and watched to see what was going on. We were a little bit scared. And he ran in the door, and I'd watched the girl walk home and go in earlier, and her child, and the guy come in, busted down the doors, and the next thing that we heard was shattered glass, a TV come out the top window, screaming like murderous screaming. And he turned all the lights on.
Oh.
He turned all the lights on. He went and did what he was doing, and then he turned all the lights off. And so the girl that was there was screaming, and then she stopped. And I was like, I think that he tried to kill her. And
oh, wow.
I went to nursing school. I was in the States, and I thought, at least if I went over there, I could take her vitals and see if she needs CPR until call 999, and 999 here is 911 999.
Yeah.
So I did, and Rob is very squeamish with the blood and things, and he kept watch. So I went over there, and the girl, it was a murder scene. It was awful. Whatever you could think, that's what it looked like. So I thought, Lord, what's going on here? This is not my plan for Friday night,
Yeah.
But I thought, man, if I could help her, she could not be, I'm sure she wouldn't save. There's, very much possibility she would die and gone to hell that night. But I picked her up and held her up, and she had blood come out of her nose and her ears, and it was very awful. And someone come in the door, and I met his mom. That's how we first met. And I didn't know at the time that tragic situation would have brought us closer to having a relationship. But it has. Her parents know us. They've accepted us in the street. They are good to us. They acknowledge our presence, which is unlikely. There's people we know that have been neighbors with the same neighbors for 20 years and never spoke to each other. And so, but I met her that night, and we've been okay with each other ever since. But it was something that I thought, I can't believe this. Like, we're in England. We're not in like the jungle, like where you think stuff like that would happen. But actually, that girl almost died in my arms. And if it wasn't for me going over there and calling ambulance, and then the other people that knew her come in, and then I left, because they all knew
Yeah.
her. But it was just that's the first time I ever met the little girl's mom, and it has given us an avenue into that family. She probably, like I've said before, she practically lives in our house now. But
Wow.
that was some time that I was like, wow, this is insane. I can't
Yeah.
believe this is my Friday night activity. Like,
Yeah. Happening right.
yeah, right here.
Right at
2
home.
weeks as I moved into
Yeah.
my house.
That's crazy.
So, but the Lord used it, and now we're able to talk to them like maybe someone else couldn't. We
Yeah.
know there's no coincidences and there's no plan B. So,
Is there someone whose life has been especially impacted by y'all's work here?
I definitely think, if we hadn't have, there were lots of houses we looked at,
yeah,
and bigger and better houses that would have been more suitable, for us. But we walked in that door of where we live now, and there was just something about that house. It's just that we couldn't put our finger on it
Yeah.
at first, and we had to go have a second and a third look at it, and we prayed about it, and the Lord opened every door for us to go there. And of course,
but every house has kids. We've had kids
Yeah,
come to the
yeah.
kids club and different stuff like
and if we hadn't, we wouldn't have been able to impact. That's really encouraging, and again, just seeing, our church folks grow. That's been a real blessing, because I feel that they're definitely not at the level of spirituality that they were when we first came.
Yeah.
I've definitely noticed them grow, and we've tried to tap in as well to their strengths, with the
Yeah.
ladies sewing group. They all can sew, so you use that for the glory of God. And so it's just been, and taking them to Wales, watching those ladies go to Wales, and the way they've opened up to Amanda and stuff has just been a real blessing.
Yeah.
We're thankful for that.
What's a moment that reminded you guys of why you came here?
For me, even though Hartlepool and the Northeast isn't home, because I'm originally from down south of the country, this is still my homeland, and I realize the spiritual heritage that this country once had, and how on fire it was for God, and how God has raised great men and indeed women from this country. And we've seen missionaries go far and wide from this country, and where we're at here in the Northeast, Hartlepool, John Wesley came up here and preached back in the 7 times in the 1700s, and Hartlepool was the only place that he never saw a convert. And here we are, we're sitting here, and we've got about 15 people that I'm sure that the Lord has answered those prayers of Wesley, send some converts, allow someone to be converted. But that said, with that said, my purpose, not only are we here in the middle of God's will, but I don't think that we should just resign that to the history books.
Mm-hmm.
I think that England, should the Lord tarry his coming, and should the Christians in this country start standing up again like we're supposed to, and start preaching the gospel, I believe we could see a mighty move of God. And I believe that if we beg God enough, that it could start off here in the Northeast.
Yeah.
The place it would seem that nobody would get converted, and I beg God that the Lord would start a revival off here in the Northeast, our corner of England, and that it would spread. We hear of like great revivals, the Great Welsh Awakening in 1904, under Evan Roberts, and that started off with just a 20-year-old girl standing up and screaming, "I love Jesus," and look what came from that. And I believe God can do something great like that again. And this is my homeland, and I'd love to see it on fire for God once again. I think that we've surrendered our country over to the devil, and it reminds me of what Margaret Thatcher said back in the 80s. and she said, you know, what possible good can come from doing nothing? She said, we must do something. You know, Winston Churchill said, you know, we will never surrender. And I think for us for me, you know, I don't want to see my country surrendered over to the devil. And as Margaret Thatcher said, what possible good can come from doing nothing? You know, I think that England and Europe, especially when it comes to missions, is largely forgotten about.
Yeah.
You know, you hear, and these fields are need. We need people to go to those fields, like, you know, the Philippines, Africa, South America. We need those people to go to those fields, but you know, we think because of our perception, or England, you know, great Christian nation, you know, it doesn't need the gospel, but it does. It's on its knees spiritually, you know, and you know, there are so many people over here that it's almost virgin territory now.
Yeah.
Like, nobody's heard of God, unless it's a cuss word. Nobody's picked up a Bible. You know, nobody knows what it truly is to pray. You know, nobody knows these things. And so for us, you know, to be here, and God to use us to come here and try to reach these people, I count it one of the greatest privileges of my life. You know, and doing what God has called me to do is the greatest honor of my life. And, I don't understand why God would choose to use me, but I'm thankful He did. Amen. So I can thank the Lord for that.
And that's one of the sadder parts of the countries. What's one of the biggest joys that you guys have experienced in being here?
I think getting to serve the Lord,
Being right smack dab in the middle of God's will.
is one of the biggest joys, despite the difficulties of the field that we're on. When we see, you know, when we see a small victory, you know, God just throws you out a little nugget just to keep you going. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the joys in the ministry. Or, you know, just to have one of your church folks come up to you and tap you on the arm and say, you know, we love you, we're praying for you. Mm-hmm. That is such a huge encouragement to know that we have affected the lives of the people here and the mm-hmm. people that God's called us to.
The ministry is hard here. It's hard everywhere, but we do enjoy what we do.
Yeah.
We enjoy being with the people. We enjoy the touristy bits of it. We enjoy the groups that come, you know. Yeah. There is, you know, joy in that, but joy in just serving Jesus, you know.
Yeah.
I think as well, even when you're on the street and you're trying to hand out tracts and no one's taking it, but then you get somebody who is, you know, religious or sympathetic to Christianity, and they shake your hand and say, thank you for what you're doing. That really is sometimes the only motivation I need to keep on going.
Right.
And sometimes God sends you people like that, you know, that, and you never see them again, you know. And the Bible does talk about sometimes you entertain an angel of sons unawares. And just to have somebody come up to you and shake your hand and say thank you for mm-hmm. sharing the gospel, or I believe in what you're doing, is a good thing, you know. I had a guy actually here in Durham 2 weeks ago come up to me and he said, I'm a man of science. He said, but I really wish you well against the false religions of this world. Mm-hmm. So, you know, even an atheist is standing there and congratulating us in what we're doing was just mind blowing for me. It's like, wow, you know, that you know, he doesn't believe in Jesus or the God that we serve, but he wishes us well against, you know, false religion. So, you know, you stick it out for the glory of the Lord. You know